Oh, let's try this again and see if it works this time. It does. Sent a request. So, hello.
Hello. Sorry, I was
Oh.
trying to join, but I was like, don't know what I was doing there.
No, honestly, it's fine. This is my first time doing this. I was terrified of the connectivity and everything.
I'm so sorry. We were supposed to have like a pre-chat call, but I was still on the advice line when you rang. So
Oh, no worries. That was a more important call, I'm sure. But it's so great to have you. Thank you for joining us. I think I'm really excited about this chat. So yeah.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. What a time! What a day! So much going on. I feel like I'm a bit frantic, but I will like try and calm down and think about your questions that I appreciate you.
Oh God. I think I'm back.
You're back.
Am I back?
You were there the whole time.
Okay. Oh, okay. For some reason it like cut off for a second. Panic. But yes, perfect. Thank you. I guess we can jump straight in. I guess people obviously know who you are and what you do, but just like a quick introduction would be great if that's possible.
What, introduce myself?
Yes, please.
No, I prefer to introduce myself because I get awkward when other people do it. I'm Deeba. I am an employment solicitor. I work at an organisation called Rights of Women. We are a band of feminist lawyers, women lawyers, who work together to make the justice system more accessible for women who have experienced violence. So we give services for women in different situations. So the services we give are in immigration and asylum law, family law, criminal law. And then I came in to Rights of Women to start up a new service for women who have been sexually harassed in the workplace. So we're giving employment law advice, we're giving them discrimination and harassment advice. And I do that with the money that has been raised from the Me Too movement by celebrities. Oh, it's telling me I've spent too long on Instagram. So the money was raised by, I've got this little like timer that tells me how long I've been on there, and I'm like, I don't want to know that. So the money was raised from the Me Too movement, but the Time's Up movement sort of specifically, it was people in the film and TV industry, but this all started in America. And they put together all this money to create what was used as a sort of legal defense. It was called a sort of legal defense fund.
Yeah.
So we're going to fight cases there. And there are British celebrities who were like, this is great, we've got to have this in the UK. So some of the money, well, some of their personal money came and public donations, and they gave it to Rights of Women, who have been doing this work since 1975, so have years of experience doing it. And now we can sort of give an additional provision to the women who experience violence, but in the workplace, which is so many more women than I think people realise.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of kind of background on these statistics beforehand, and it's actually shocking. Like I guess I have a lot of privilege because I probably wouldn't ever experience it myself, but it is just awfully shocking, these kind of statistics that come out about it. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think everything that's happened over the last few days with Sarah Everard and the way the police have handled the kind of reaction, I think we are having these really broad, important conversations about violence against women, but also the criminal justice system and the way that women experience violence, and how the state is really a part of that, and there's been a long history of violence against women perpetrated by the state. So it's really good that we're having these conversations, but I think I think tonight, you know, I want to kind of broaden that conversation out and say that women are experiencing violence, you know, in the street, in public spaces, but also at home, whether that be domestic abuse or coercive control or intimate partner violence, but also in the workplace, you know, where they are interacting with men and with customers, with clients, but also colleagues, and that doesn't stop in the workplace. You know, that doesn't stop there. Unfortunately, we speak to a lot of women. Last year we've been open for about a year and a half now, taking calls, and in our first year we looked at some of the data of women who have been calling us, and half of all our callers. So I got that notification again saying, "Get off your app," and I was like, "No, I need to be on it now." Sorry. So what was I saying? Almost half of all our callers had experienced sexual assault in the workplace. So I hope that kind of combats this idea that sort of harassment or sexual harassment, which we tend to still kind of focus on just jokes and, you know, sexual comments that sort of fall flat. Yes, of course, that's part of it, but we're still dealing with a lot of women who are experiencing sexual assault and more serious sexual violence as well. And a lot of our callers are calling from organizations, brands, shops you probably use every day. I mean, obviously I can't say any names, but these are not sort of obscure places. They will be big organizations which we know and trust and use all the time. And as well, just a lot of those women have, I think there's kind of a bit of a myth that everyone's sort of working at home, when I think I'm right in thinking only a third of the workforce have actually been working from home. It's most of the women who have been working have been frontline workers. So most of the women who call us are in the NHS, or they're social care workers, or they work in supermarkets. So they have been on the front line of all of this pandemic, and for them, working at home has not happened. They have just been working the whole time. And the experience that they've been getting. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping ahead of your question.
No, it's fine. Just go.
I mean, what they've been experiencing is, so when the sort of pandemic first happened, you know, I was sitting there with my colleagues going, oh my God, you know, are women going to still call us? But yes, they did. They called us in droves. And what we were hearing from women who were already being harassed, particularly by somebody, was that that harassment was turning into a stalking situation. So somebody who is harassing you isn't necessarily just going to stop because of the pandemic. I think especially if people are feeling out of control, and sort of big events like a pandemic has happened that are out of their control, very often women become the targets of the way of feeling control. So we have women telling us that their perpetrators were sort of increasing harassment against them, and then we found the sort of clever ways that perpetrators were using the pandemic to their advantage. So we have women telling us that, like, their employer would be refusing to furlough them, in the sense sort of making sure that they would still be coming to the workplace so that they would be able to harass them, but this time with less witnesses and less people to hold them to account. So we had one, you know, some woman told me that the other day, or what we're seeing as well is like perpetrators using, lots of redundancies are happening at the moment. So lots of perpetrators using redundancy processes to kind of abuse their power they hold over those women who they are harassing or have been making sexual advances to, or whatever it may be. And manipulating redundancy processes to kind of punish women who are refusing those advances, or whatever the harassment may be. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I guess I mistakenly thought that, I guess with COVID, that because I assumed that most of the workforce had gone home, that the nature of kind of harassment would have changed. And like, virtually it would have kind of augmented into kind of stalking online. But actually, you kind of don't realize that. I guess me and my bubble has sat here at home doing my uni work and kind of not thought that there are people still on the front lines working in actually what are professions that you not would expect to be safer, but if you're working, say, in the NHS, you would expect it to be, I guess, a more kind of vigilant environment at least. But it's quite shocking to hear that women kind of are kind of, I guess, being controlled even more because of COVID, and I think it is worrying, and I think it's worrying as well because the way we're working is potentially going to change. So, like, if you're not having people, like you said, people not furloughing people to keep other people out of the office, but keep some people in it's quite disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this work is very disturbing, I'm afraid. Like,
Yeah.
I've always been told that I should be more cheerful or kind of more optimistic about these things, but it's difficult to be. Like, we're running a frontline service, and I think we're certainly hearing the worst stories. I mean, I had a horrific call earlier, which I can't really talk about, but I think, yeah, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues, and I think we have to be careful that we can't kind of we're currently separating out violence against women into different spaces.
Yeah.
And while of course they're all relevant, but they all sort of intersect with each other. When you are, when you're a woman, it's kind of your journey in life is like you're going to school and you're experiencing sexualization, and then you go to university, and we know that there's so much sexual assault and sexual violence on campus, and then you enter the workplace and it's the same thing. You're experiencing discrimination just for being a woman, and also harassment in terms of being sexualized as well. And then that kind of, those are the institutions it happens in, but it's from the moment that you're waking up, really, when you're going to the tube to get to your job. There are all these different ways you can experience violence, and then come home and possibly experiencing it from a partner or a family member. It's really sort of ever-present danger for women.
Yeah.
And so this week has just been really, really hard, I think, especially for everybody in the Vogue sector, who have sort of been making these points for a long, long time. And it's really good that they're being heard, but we have to kind of turn these moments into action. We can't just keep on going round and round and round and just saying all these awful things are happening. We have to start doing more to prevent these things from happening, because otherwise just the stories will never stop coming.
Yeah, and I think it's quite evident in that there is obviously always a performative element to kind of I guess moments that we've experienced, especially like the one we're going through at the moment. And I think it was interesting because one thing that struck me the other day was that obviously misogyny isn't a hate crime, and that obviously you've got other kind of forms of hate crimes, homophobic hate crimes, racist hate crimes, and I think these are the kind of reforms that are kind of they're structural, and I guess now's not the time to be complacent, like you said, and how do we what kind of reforms need to be put in place to kind of, as we move forward from this moment and learn from it, how do we kind of change the way society is organized and works? I know it's quite a broad question. I'm really sorry about that.
It's great. I'm so love to have these questions. I think as well, we're having a lot of kind of knee-jerk reactions at the moment, like what do we need to do to fix all this? And I think misogyny is a hate crime, making public sexual harassment a criminal offence. I think in theory they sound like good ideas, don't they? I mean, who they don't sound like good ideas, but I think the more I've kind of been in this sector and the more I've kind of learned about it, the situation is much more complicated than that, and actually criminalizing things doesn't necessarily get to the root of kind of preventing the offending happening in the first place. There are also serious dangers to consider with misogyny, making it as a hate crime, because the problem is that these things are so underreported. It might make it look like that there's hardly any misogynistic hate crime, which I think would be very dangerous and could lead to different provisions not being properly funded, and kind of people making arguments that this is not as big of a deal as it is. And I think as well, you know, it's hard to say what a misogynistic crime is, because some people argue that all domestic abuse, all violence against women is misogynistic. But unless somebody sort of, if you make it a hate crime, and unless somebody sort of makes a specific misogynistic, uses a, you know, specific misogynistic term, it might not be registered as a misogynistic crime. Although you could make the argument that any sort of kind of behavior like that to a woman is kind of motivated by misogyny. But unless they're giving like the marker saying, you know, like with a religious hate crime or something like that, they would have to kind of be specifying, referencing the religion or some kind of way of showing that. But with a woman, that might not happen. You could just shout something at a woman and it might not be about women. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So then that kind of, you know, could sort of confuse the situation. So I think I want there to be I want there to be solutions. I want there to be good solutions, but I think we need to kind of sit and think about these things and what will actually be the actual repercussions, because I think we have so many deeper problems within the criminal justice system, and the real problem here is that women don't report. They don't report what's happened to them. It's so normalized. And sort of, I think there are arguments to say that making it misogyny a hate crime would empower people to report, possibly. But sorry, we've gone on and on about that. But basically, I'm still just trying to work out in my head if that's genuinely the right thing to do. And I think there's a woman on Twitter who's written a book about this. Her name's Vera Gray.
Okay, yeah.
She's like an academic. If any of you guys join and want to follow her, but she's did a really good thread recently on why misogyny as a hate crime actually might make things worse, which should give sort of everybody pause to think, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to have these conversations, and actually I think listen to the people who've either experienced it or know exactly what they're talking about, and kind of can reflect on it. And I think that's really important. And I guess, do you think post-COVID, like there will be kind of potential room for these shifts? Like, I guess COVID's been lauded as this possibility of like post-COVID recovery, post-COVID change kind of things. Do you think we have the opportunity to make kind of positive progress, or do you think it's just going to stagnate further or even devolve in that kind of sense?
I don't know, like if I look at today what's been going through Parliament, the police and crime sentencing bill, which is kind of knee-jerk reaction to kind of related to, well, it's kind of a reaction to the Black Lives Matters, all the protests last summer, particularly. And so you kind of look at that and you see, oh, like it is really possible to just get legislation like up and it can be done. But if the kind of solution to solving our problems post-pandemic is to kind of increase police powers and state intervention in kind of these kinds of things, I don't think that it's gonna help. The sort of more the real problems we have are chronic underfunding of the criminal justice system and the Vogue sector. Those are not going to go away with tougher sentences. Those issues, the issue has never been sentencing. The issue is that sex offenders don't get arrested and they don't get prosecuted. It never even gets to sentencing, most of the time. So those are kind of, I worry that, we've kind of gone into a sort of reactionary way of dealing with these kind of more societal problems that COVID has thrown up. Well, kind of, just exposed all of these already deeper issues that we already had, and then kind of putting in legislation like this that we're just going to have better, we're going to have longer sentences, it kind of misses the entire point, in my opinion. So post-COVID, I mean, there's all different things you could do to kind of improve the equality in so many different ways in terms of structural racism, but as well as in terms of structural sexism. I'm a big proponent of introducing flexible working. Apparently, the government has sort of committed to the idea that flexible working should be the default going forward. And I think it's a really important thing to do. And I think it has relevance to sexual harassment because so many people are at the mercy of their managers and their supervisors. You know, they have to, that's why so many abuses of power happens, because they have all the decision making and they can decide your hours and your work structure, and you are kind of beholden to that, and there is less freedom and there is less ability to plan your life, and if you have kids, you know, you can't do childcare and you can't do all of these things. So I think that's really, really key if we want to get to, we need to give people more sort of control over their lives and take it away from people who are having that power over them and abusing that power over them, really.
Yeah, I kind of really get this kind of idea of almost diluting it down in the sense that if you kind of redistribute this power amongst people, especially giving it back to women to control their lives, it's kind of a really important, I guess, determinant of like, you've got the liberty to take yourself out of a situation or shape your life as you wish. And I think it's one of those things that you've got to also, I guess, question who often is in power is men that can kind of determine these things. And like, I guess almost instead of looking at what we need to do for women, it maybe is looking at the position that men occupy more in those power dynamics sometimes. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this at all. I think I was looking at the other day, kind of the Jackie Weaver story that came out probably about a month and a half maybe ago now, and I was thinking back at that
already.
I know, it really freaked me out.
Just anymore, does it? Okay.
And I was just thinking about it, and I thought at the time there were so many like memes and jokes made out of it, but actually we were seeing live on air misogyny in action, and it really kind of, in hindsight, disturbed me because I think at that point no one thought actually I mean there would have been voices obviously, but society was not just kind of mocking the men, it was she was in this kind of bubble of comedy, and actually that position shouldn't have existed in the first place. And I think,
oh my god, clap to that. I didn't think it was funny at all. I was like, this is outrageous, like that they feel comfortable to talk to her like that. And you know, that's just one incident that's been out there. You know, they will have built up a sort of level of comfort in shouting in women's faces very comfortably, like over a period of, you know, that doesn't just happen. That's somebody who's done that many, many times before. And I just thought it was appalling, really. I know everyone thought it was hilarious, but you know, I don't know, maybe it's just the sensitivity of the work I do, or like, you know, I've spoken to women who have had things thrown at them. You know, it's not funny. It's really not funny when you know like the impact it's having on them, and you know, I guess that people don't really understand that this is genuinely happening in workplaces because they think this is sort of confined to some kind of like parish council where it's got enough distance from our lives that we can kind of laugh at it. But you know, I speak to NHS workers who are sort of regularly screamed at, ambulance workers, you know, being, you know, they're just there trying to do their job, and they've, you know, have drunk people throwing things at them, and you know, it's really, really distressing. So I'm really glad you said that, and I know I'd like to be at a point where we didn't think these things are funny, but
it just kind of baffled me when I thought back at it, and actually it was just it also, there's this assumption that it's older men as well that are doing it, but actually this exists within every age group, and it kind of, I don't know, it just, the fact it was filmed, there's instances that haven't ever been recorded in that way. But then it goes back to what you were saying about in criminal justice, people are worried to report things because are they just going to get laughed at or laughed down because of what they've experienced? And actually, it raises all of these questions, and I think it's they need to be brought out of these kind of, oh, that's comedy, oh, you need to kind of lighten up a bit, and notice that these phrases aren't kind of, they're sexist phrases to say lighten up about treating a woman that way in the workplace kind of thing. And I think it's, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like it's the same with any other group, to be honest. Like, you know, they make, you know, like if you look at how gay people were treated maybe a few years ago a bit more openly, these things are always kind of rooted in like, well, it's just a joke. And I think we need to go through a period of believing it's just a joke first before we, you know, actually start recognizing the impact and harm it's happening. And I think sexual harassment, we're in the same kind of cognitive distance that we need to have when we accept these things, which is first of all convincing ourselves that these are, you know, it's just a joke, it is harmless, nobody means badly, and then sort of recognizing actually you're not really seeing the sort of the darker side of things, or you're kind of making light of those things by saying it all falls under kind of a joke umbrella. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that's just a way that society has of dealing with its own behaviour, by just kind of excusing it as a joke, but it's really real to the people who are living it. It's very real to them.
Yeah, I think it raises the question of socialization versus legislation, and how those hybrids come together. Of, you can't just legislate against something because legislation doesn't always change behaviour, and those kind of things. I guess that's a much deeper issue for maybe a longer chat. But I guess I wanted to ask, and I think in this week it's been particularly hard, as you've said, about any kind of positivity that kind of comes out. But I was just wondering, kind of like in the last year, anything that's like a standout moment to you in terms of positive change that has occurred, or if actually there's not been anything so substantial that actually it would ever, I don't know, kind of put a positive edge on kind of progress. But I was just wondering if there was anything there that you might have thought was a big thing to be celebrated, or a big win in women's rights.
I'm such a downer. I'm like, no. No, I mean, look, the everything that's happened over this last week is really important, and I would say what happens next will kind of be the true judge of what happens here, because we kind of had a moment like this before when Me Too happened in 2017, and it kind of felt like this cultural moment that was going to have significance through, you know, mobilized through social media and people sharing their kind of experiences. And I think, you know, that is really, really positive. And if this is a moment like that, then that's great, because a huge amount of money has actually been raised. A huge amount of money has been raised, and money has the capacity to kind of really create change, in the sense that if you're going to solve these problems, they need to be resourced properly. But obviously the government should be doing that. But the fact that there is some money on the table now, it is really exciting, because it means, you know, my service wouldn't have been possible unless there had been a moment like that, and people had put down their money and done that. So I'm excited to see what happens with this money. I hope that it's kind of distributed in a kind of inclusive way that looks at organisations which have been doing so much for the Vogue sector, for Black and minoritized women particularly. I hope they get a big share of that money. But it will be really interesting to see what conversations happen now in terms of distributing that money and making sure that it is spent for the best, because, you know, it really has the power to do some good. But I think what we need to kind of, you know, still kind of take this moment and turn it into a moment where we can look at how these things structurally affect us, and it's all about looking at how we prevent violence against women in the first place, rather than, you know, we're kind of just fighting fires. All of these services, even my service, we're just fighting a fire that's already happened, and we need to do so much more to kind of look at what else we can do. So let's say that moment is still to come this year, and that we can celebrate some good news when this money is distributed, hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I mean, AXA, who will be watching us, is big on kind of funding these services properly, and how important it is to have well-funded justice systems and well-funded um, call like lines to call to get advice, and to kind of make yourself feel like you're not alone in your kind of what you're experiencing. And I think it is so important. And I think yeah, I think it's actually a matter of what's to come that could be positive than necessarily what we've seen so far. But I know Rights of Women is funded fully by donations and kind of I guess benefactors. But I think it's really important to say on here that you guys are dependent on those donations.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I don't want to agree to that.
Okay. No.
But yeah, but you know, we certainly welcome donations, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I always say, yeah, donating is the best kind of activism you can do. So
yeah, so
do that.
Everyone who's watching needs to kind of, that's the best way you can help. You've heard it here first, I guess. Well, not here first, but
not first.
not first,
Yeah,
definitely not first.
Again.
Yeah. But thank you so much for talking to us. I know our discussion was quite short, but I think it's so important to be having them at the moment. And like you said, I think the more people this reaches, the more it kind of could have a positive impact, what we're talking about. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry for not sticking to your questions. We're just like freestyling.
No, that's absolutely fine. I don't like questions either. And I think actually, if you stick to questions too rigidly, you lose the valuable points of discussion. So
yeah, I just think there's just so much that's happened this week. There's just no way we could not have like talked about it. But no, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for showing interest in the work we do. And thank you for all you do. Thank you guys for coming. Just thank everybody. Like, I love when my friends log in. That's so nice. Hi. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll text you after this. But thank you so much for coming on, and it will be saved on our Instagram. So direct anyone this way, anyone who's seen it and wants to watch it again.
Good. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.